Alright, we're bringing sexy back in this video. Retro. Okay, retro baits. If you're my age, you know baits come and go. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. Brands come or go. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. Brands today are getting bought up left and right. Just check out GSM Outdoors. Has been buying up brands for the last 2 or 3 years. And sometimes when that happens, baits disappear, right? I think all of us can remember some retro, we call them retro baits now, but baits from the 70s for me, the 80s, the 90s, that just have absolutely disappeared, like off of, major retail shops. And you can find them some places at like flea markets. You find them at, mom and pop independent tackle shops that have inventory that's 25, 30 years old, because the business has been in their family for generations. Those are some of the coolest places to like visit. And a lot of people don't understand like the history of sometimes it happens, and it gets real confusing, because these brands change names and change companies and partnerships and all that stuff. And so we're going to bring sexy back today, okay? If you are my age, you are going to remember Uncle Josh, okay? And it was just huge. And mostly Uncle Josh Bait Company was known for pork rinds, right? Everybody know. I mean, it's just like you can't get around it. That was like the craze when I was a kid. And little jars, you learn your lessons, you leave them out, you don't put them back in the jar. What happens? They freaking just get hard as crap. I mean, and you're like kicking, all the different tricks, and you figure out all the different kinds. And basically, years ago, I'm pretty sure, everything changed. Like, again, some things used to be made better, right? A lot of things used to be made better. A lot of things today are made cheap, okay? Or they're made overseas, and there's no real providence in really the process, right? Well, Uncle Josh's pork rinds, for example, like, they came from like 3-year-old. If you have a farming background or anything like that, you know what I'm talking about, okay? Back in the day, okay, the day before I was born, okay, hogs and stuff were brought to market when they were like 2 and 3 years old, okay? The fatback and everything that came was available from the butchers, okay? Okay, my background, all right, or initially, right? Seeing this stuff come in terms of being, a full carcass fabricator, okay? Nowadays, 6 to 8 months, okay? So you went from a 2 to 3 year old to now it's 6 months, 6, 7 months old that's getting fabricated, right? And all the pork that's coming out. So the fatback from the quality completely degenerated, right? Like the fat on a 6 to 8 month old hog versus a 2 or 3 year old hog is considerably different. And that fatback is what Alan Jones and Urban, Schreiner from Wisconsin, which were way back in the 1920s. Now, they didn't incorporate their business until after World War II. It was like the late 1940s, okay? But they had been doing this, throughout, right? And because back then, that was the norm for people grew these hogs, and then they had the butchers, local butcher shops, and they would collect the fat back, and they created their pork rinds. And so nowadays, of course, it's virtually impossible in volume like that, like back then, to get hogs that are being, fabricated that are 2 or 3 years old, where they can just get thousands of pounds of fat back, right? Like before. So basically, the pork rinds suddenly, removed, from the marketplace, right? Probably about 10 years ago, where, it was the last you really saw them, right? Costs, everything more expensive now. What are people going to pay for pork rinds? But it was still one of the most popular fishing methods, right? So that's Uncle Josh, right? So, but that wasn't all they did, right? And so it's hard to figure out, like, the trajectory, okay? Because eventually Uncle Josh would be folded in to another brand along with other brands under the Hard and Soft Fishing Company, okay? Which I think is still run by Kurt Kellogg, okay? So they had brands in that, okay, that you might be more familiar with. Al and Patty Kalin. So the Kalins. Most of these companies were from up in Midwest, north, okay, towards Canada, okay? Like Uncle Josh, right? Kalins. Most people are, Sizmic, okay? Y'all remember Sizmic? Okay? Now it's Kalin Sizmic, right? But a lot of the Sizmic stuff, used to have the Uncle Josh. Okay? Used to have the Uncle Josh labeling on the back, right? Okay? So everything kind of just changes around, all right? Acme, okay? Part of Hard and Soft Fishing with Kalin's. Acme, okay? All, ice fishing. Think ice fishing, things like that. All these things kind of have gotten muddled really in the last 20 years with a lot of the older brands and then also just the private equity and consolidation in the industry. But Sizmic is where we're bringing sexy back, okay? Because some of these baits were absolutely the best bass catchers out there, okay? They just were. And some, slowly but surely, you stop seeing it on the shelves, right? At your major retailers, okay? And it was a shame because they had some of the coolest freaking colors. And I mean, the only thing for me, okay, my opinion, and you can put in the comments whether you agree or disagree. The only one that rivaled Sizmic for me in my teens was Zoom. That was the only one that rivaled it. None of the other. It was Sizmic and Zoom. At the tackle shop, when I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, always pushed people into buying those particular brands, okay? They were just higher quality, better, and ultimately they caught fish. And we had an incredible bass fishery in the James River, literally right 5 minutes away, where, again, all of these soft plastics were proven, okay? And so that's kind of like where I got when I'm, restocking shelves as a 15-year-old and, changing out the water and filling the ice bin and talking to people about, what's good, what are people buying today, blah, blah, blah. Back in the day, it was freaking Sizmic, okay? Because they absolutely caught fish. And one of the actual combinations, okay, that existed was the Okeechobee rig. Okay, was the Okeechobee rig right here. This is the old format. Okeechobee rig, that's how it rigged. With a warhead weight system. Okay? So let's get into it. And why we're going to bring sexy back. Why we're going to bring this bait back. Okay? Because it absolutely still to this day catches giants. Okay? If you're fishing a tidal fishery. Matted grass. Heavy vegetation. You know what I'm talking about, guys. Tidal Potomac grass, okay? James River grass in the Mid-Atlantic, okay? Again, anywhere there's thick, heavy vegetation, you are talking about the Okeechobee rig. Obviously, namesake Okeechobee. Why? Heavy matted grass, grass beds, grass, and Okeechobee, right? This is the warhead weight system, okay? Now, this, most of you probably remember, if you were my age, this is the Jungle Toad, the Sizmic Jungle Toad. Is it available today? Ask them why not, okay? Why is this not available at every single retailer? Absolutely. There's so many things that you can do with this. Unbelievable. Tidal fishery, right? Black and blues were the number one. Whether it was worms, whether it was toads, whether it was any kind of soft plastic, everybody back in the day wanted black and blue, and nobody did it better than Sizmic. Okay? But it didn't stop there. They had tons of colors. And the coolest thing is, long before the bait makers out there are going to freaking slay me for this, because like laminate, I guess, is the right term for it. long before I remember anybody else, it had the two-tone. Okay? I'm telling you guys, if you see these anywhere, okay, and you have no interest, reach out to me. Reach out to me. I'll Venmo you, I'll Cash App you, and you can send them to me. Okay? You come across an old shop down south in the southeast who's still got freaking jungle toads, or still got like the old school, or still got the Okeechobee rig. The Okeechobee rig is packaged in like this. Okay? This system was freaking kick-ass. It still is kick-ass today. Okay? Because it came with the rig, one already rigged, and then all your backup soft plastics. Okay? This was how it was packaged. This was one of the original first combination packages that I can remember. Okay? And the big companies have moved away from that. A lot of them. They want you to buy more soft plastics. Okay? And so I really think somebody should bring the sexy back, because these were legit. These were legit, and if you can find them, 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, I think were the only two that I can remember. I don't believe it went any lower than that. Crawl pattern. Okay? You got crawfish. It's just, basically, how to explain this, okay? It's kind of like the reverse Texas rig, right? A lot of people use bullet weights on their Texas rigs, right? And you're rigging it up. This is kind of the reverse, because the weight is falling, okay? And your eyelet for your line is up here. So your line is up here, okay? And you're punching that mat, okay? And all that weight, it's front loaded to break through that mat. And if you guys know anything about grass, it's not solid all the way down to the bottom, right? It cakes up top because of the sun, and it cakes up there while it's still wet. And that's why a lot of times you'll see it when it's dying out, it's all brown up top because it's clumped up there. But underneath the surface, 6 to 8 inches, there tends to be a break, okay? And that's where your bass are moving around in, okay? And a lot of times weights don't break through that. They're not big enough. They don't have the shape, that bullet weight, to shoot through that as it falls. And so the jungle toad, this thing is just great with the Okeechobee rig. But this thing now, if you look at a lot of the modern day Hellgramite, a lot of the modern day kind of like smaller JDM stuff, it's very, very similar to this, only a smaller form, okay? In terms of what it really looks like, because this in the water column, a bass gets considered to be a crawl, gets considered to be a Hellgramite, considered to be any number of things. So forage, right? And I think that's what makes it such unique in a sense of being able to last the test of time. To where when you go out there now and you throw these, the bass today are not like the bass in the 80s and the 90s. They're not used to seeing that, okay? They're really not used to seeing too many baits break through that matted vegetation in that kind of vertical presentation, okay? And so, again, fish different. This is what I always say to people is, think out of the box and stop fishing like everybody else. Because while that guy 30, 40 yards away from you is catching fish along the grass line, rolling a chatterbait, okay, why did chatterbait become so effective along inside and outside grass lines? Why? You're basically poaching the bass that are on the outside of the larger grass mat. Think Susquehanna Flats if you fish the upper bay, if you're in my region. Or just 25, 30, 50, 60, 70 yards of just grass, right? Guys are working the edges and the lines with their chatterbait. Got no problem with it. Great presentation. Only because they don't really have what they need to get down in through the mats further in, where most of the bass probably are. Okay? And so you are picking off bass around the inside and outside grass lanes, right? Throwing the frog on the top. Like working areas on the top, right? But you're not getting down in, and that's what this bait. This is where this bait was freaking. You hear a lot about, if you follow baseball, you're hearing a lot this week about the torpedo bat. Well, this is the torpedo freaking weight, okay? This warhead weight system absolutely destroys through the mat, okay? And in order to, you got to get down there. You got to get down there, right? And so paired with the jungle toad, but you could use this system. You could create this system. And I know people that have, like, that have modified the different things. I mean, look at some of the presentations today using weights, okay? I just did a video. The Jika rig, the Neko rig, all this stuff, in essence, is more finessey, but not like this, okay? Not strong enough to penetrate grass mats and heavy vegetation. Okay, this is a totally different beast, right? But the similarity today of the baits that are popular that exist are being used in other areas of the water column, but the mindset in the engineering is kind of the same, where it has a weight and it has the weight attached to the hook, okay, and it's used. This is just rigged completely different. This has got a wire loop into the warhead bait, okay? That actually, when you rig this, okay, you're going to rig your soft plastic, all right, and then you're going to rig your weight. You're going to throw your weight in onto your hook. So this is resting on the hook, okay, and then your tie is coming out of the top. See that? So your tie is there, okay. And this is how you're presenting it. Okay? Now, this system nowadays, remember, this is 20 plus, 25, 30 years old. Okay? Right? This kind of mindset. How far have we come in soft plastics today? Like, how many other soft plastics exist today that you could present same exact spot in your matted heavy vegetation, okay, that you could present on a rig system just like this, okay? And you could change, you can go 4-aught, 5-aught, whatever you want, okay? Diving, I mean, I've seen guys rig swim baits, okay, which is it's crazy, but they catch fish because you basically are diving below the mat. Once you get through that mat and this falls, it's like forage kind of diving to the bottom, right? And it's got that paddle tail in the back, or maybe it's got a split tail or whatever. There's any number of things that you can use, okay, with this. It's absolutely crazy. Again, if you come across the jungle toad, okay, because to my knowledge, they're not really being sold retail. I don't think they're available on the websites. You might be able to find them on eBay, to be honest. But you want to get the jungle toads. If you can't find the warhead system, okay, at this point, you can kind of work it yourself. You can kind of figure it out. You can figure it out pretty good. You can change up as long as you're using a 1/2 ounce or a 3/4 ounce kind of weight because you want that weight to be heavy. You could probably figure out a way to replicate this. But we're going to bring sexy back, okay? Because these are absolute freaking fish catchers, okay? Black and blue. Actually, this is the laminate blue with brown. Watermelon red. Crawl. Solid black and blue. This one's like green pumpkin. Okay. Darker black and blue. See that? A lot darker. And look at that action. Look at the two. One of the first. I can't remember, guys. I mean, help me out in my comments, man. Now almost all the baits today have some variation of that little like paddle, right? That little paddle tail. Sizmic had it on these 25, 30 years ago, right? And later on they became all the rage. Hollow on the inside, okay? Very light, so you could finesse fish, you know? You could easily finesse fish this any different ways, you know, without the weight, okay? Because the action is just absolutely, look at all that movement that you're looking at getting, okay, from these. And, you know, obviously, you know, because of the name, you know, the jungle toad, you know, people think it's like these things are being fished like a frog. I mean, you certainly could, again, throw that on top of mats and work it through, you know, but there's so many other presentations that you can use for that. But the one thing you want to start to figure out, okay, is that weight transfer, is that system, okay? When you're fishing in a tidal fishery or you're fishing in some place that's got massive grass beds, heavy vegetation, you want to get down, 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 down. So many baits today are not going to get you down, okay, in the right way. And so my argument to folks is, look, lots of people using forward-facing sonar these days, right? Go where they're not, okay? They're not using forward-facing sonar on that heavy vegetation, okay? Go where they're not, because I'm going to tell you, that could be where the fish are, okay? You know what I mean? So start to think about things a little bit differently. Let's bring sexy back right here, because this presentation is absolutely sexy, okay? Get out there, hit me up, because you can try this, all right? And if you see this anywhere, any of them old-timer shops, old mom-and-pop independent stores, you got to pick yourself up some of this, or message me and let me know where you're seeing it, because this is a bait I drive hundreds and hundreds of miles for just to buy a few packs. All right, guys, I'll see you next time.